What's the real difference between a casual promise you make to a friend and one that's, well, legally bulletproof? Between a friendly handshake and a deal that the courts will actually enforce? Well, today, we're going to trace the entire life cycle of a legal promise, and we're using the Indian Contract Act as our guide. Okay, let's jump right in.
So what is that secret ingredient? The legal magic that transforms a simple yes into a totally binding agreement. The answer, believe it or not, lies in a framework that, despite being over 150 years old, pretty much powers our entire digital world today, the Indian Contract Act of 1872.
Every single legal promise, whether it's for a simple online purchase or a massive business merger, is built from the exact same core components. So let's start at the very beginning and ask, what exactly is a contract in the eyes of the law?
Now, the key phrase to lock on to here is enforceable by law. That's the whole game. It's what separates a casual, yeah, I'll be there, from a deal the courts will actually back up. And to get that legal seal of approval, you need three non-negotiable ingredients: an offer, an acceptance, and this thing called consideration.
So, let's build this contract from the ground up, starting with those three essential pillars. And you absolutely need all three, because if even one is missing, the entire agreement just comes tumbling down.
First up, pillar number one, a clear offer. Someone has to put a definite proposal on the table. Then, pillar two, unconditional acceptance. The other person has to say yes to that exact proposal, no ifs, ands, or buts. And finally, pillar three, lawful consideration. This is the crucial part where both sides bring something of value to the table. It's the what's in it for me for everybody involved.
But hang on a second. Not every proposal is a legal offer. Think about when you see a price tag in a shop. That's not actually the shop offering to sell you the item. Legally, it's called an invitation to offer. It's inviting you to make an offer at the checkout, which the cashier then accepts. This might seem like a tiny difference, but it's what prevents total commercial chaos. Otherwise, a shop would be legally forced to sell you an item even if they just ran out of stock.
Okay, let's put this into action with a quick story. Let's meet X and Y. X makes a very clear, very definite offer. He'll sell his car to Y for 15 lakhs. So far, so good. We have our first pillar in place, a clear offer.
But Y doesn't just say yes. He comes back with, I'll give you 10 lakhs. Now, this isn't an acceptance. What Y has just done is make a brand new offer, what the law calls a counteroffer. And this one little move completely changes the legal dynamic between them.
So, what do you think happened to X's original offer to sell for 15 lakhs? Is it still on the table? Can Y change his mind a little later and just go back to it?
Nope, it's gone, completely wiped from existence. Legally, the second Y made that counteroffer, the original 15 lakh offer was destroyed. He can't change his mind and go back to it. The power has now swung back to X, who can either accept or reject Y's new 10 lakh offer. The key takeaway here is, a counteroffer isn't just a negotiation, it's a flat-out rejection.
And that brings us to our third and final pillar, consideration. This is basically the legal term for the value that gets exchanged in the deal. A good way to think about it is the price of the promise. It doesn't have to be money either. It could be a service, an object, or even a promise not to do something. As long as both parties are getting something and giving something, you have valid consideration.
But of course, there's a twist. Even if you have a perfect offer, a perfect acceptance, and solid consideration, some agreements are just unenforceable from the moment they're made. The law basically considers them invalid right from the get-go.
These are what we call void agreements. They are, for all intents and purposes, dead on arrival. This covers things like contracts to commit a crime, betting agreements, and, the one we're going to focus on, any agreement made with a minor.
This whole principle was really set in stone back in 1903 in a landmark case, Mahori Bibi versus Darmodas Ghose. But why is the law so strict about this? Well, the core reason is protection. The law just assumes that minors might not fully get the consequences of their agreements, so it protects them from being exploited. A contract with a minor isn't just breakable, it's treated as if it never even existed in the first place.
Okay, so we've built our contract, it's legally sound, it's solid. But as we all know, promises, even legal ones, get broken. So what happens when one party just fails to hold up their end of the bargain? That's when we enter the territory of a breach of contract. A breach can happen in a couple of ways. An actual breach is pretty straightforward. The delivery date comes and goes, and the goods don't show up.
Simple. But there's also something called an anticipatory breach. This is when someone tells you in advance that they're not going to fulfill their side of the deal. The law actually gives you the right to sue them right away. You don't have to sit around and wait for the performance date to actually pass.
But what if the promise isn't broken by a person, but by fate? Imagine an event so unexpected, so dramatic, that it makes fulfilling the contract literally impossible. This is where a really fascinating legal idea called the doctrine of frustration comes into play. It's basically the law's way of saying the contract is over because its entire purpose has been destroyed.
Now, the bar for this is incredibly high. It can't just be that the deal became less profitable or harder to do. Performance has to become physically or legally impossible because of something nobody could have predicted and that neither party caused. The classic example you always hear is a contract to perform in a concert hall and the hall burns down the day before the show. The contract is frustrated and it just dissolves.
So, a contract has been breached. Now what? The promise is broken, but the story isn't over yet. The law provides a whole toolbox of solutions, or remedies, for the person who was wronged.
The go-to solution, 9 times out of 10, is damages, which is just a fancy word for financial compensation to cover the loss. In some very specific, very rare situations, like the sale of a one-of-a-kind painting, a court might order specific performance, forcing the party to actually go through with the deal. And finally, there's an injunction, which is a court order that stops someone from doing something that would break the contract.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. These sound like dusty old principles from a totally different era. I mean, this act was written way before anyone even dreamed of the internet. But here's the amazing part. These century-old rules are the very engine running our modern digital economy.
Just think about this for a second. India's e-commerce market is on track to hit $200 billion by 2025. Every single time you click Buy Now or I agree to those long terms of service, you are creating a contract. And that contract is built on these exact same principles: offer, acceptance, and consideration. Our entire digital life rests on this 19th century legal foundation.
Which really leaves us with a vital question for our one-click world. As agreements become instant and terms of service stretch for pages and pages that nobody ever reads, understanding this life cycle isn't just an academic exercise, it's absolutely essential. It's how we make sure our digital handshakes are truly as good as our word.